The sky above her had been red for so long that she no longer remembered what other colors felt like, not what they looked like. Blue had once meant coolness. Gray had meant safety. Black had meant rest. But this sky, the color of oxidized blood and storm-scoured iron, pressed down on her thoughts like a weight. It was always moving, always boiling. Clouds dragging themselves across the upper atmosphere in slow, bruised spirals. As if the planet itself were trying to breathe through damaged lungs, she lay half-buried in ash and powdered stone, her breathing shallow, her chest hitching with every inhale. Each breath scraped her throat raw. The filters in her respirator had failed hours ago, maybe days. Time had lost meaning somewhere. Between the third horizon collapse and the moment her internal temperature regulators shut down to preserve what little energy remained, her name no longer mattered, her species barely did. She had walked this world alone for 112 standard cycles at least. That was what the implant counter insisted. She remembered when the counter had still meant something, when it had been a comfort, a promise that survival could be measured, that as long as numbers kept increasing, she was still here, still defying the quiet certainty of extinction that haunted every thought. Now, the numbers just ticked on, indifferent. The planet had once been tagged as marginally habitable. Thin atmosphere, toxic storms, subsurface water pockets. Dangerous but survivable with preparation. That was before the terraforming arrays failed, before the human fleet vanished without explanation. Before the distress, beacons began screaming into the void and never received a reply, before she became the last. One still answering them, her limbs were numb. Not the sharp, panicked numbness of fear, but the dull, spreading absence that came from systems shutting down one by one. She could feel it creeping inward, like frost crawling along bone. The ache in her muscles had faded hours ago, replaced by a gentle heaviness, a seductive stillness. This was how it ended then. No witnesses, no legacy, no final message worth transmitting. She turned her face slightly toward the horizon, where shattered spires of alien stone jutted from the ash like the ribs of some colossal corpse. Wind dragged fine dust across her visor, painting the world in slow-motion streaks. Somewhere far above, the planet's broken magnetic field allowed radiation to bleed through. It's unseen and unstoppable. Her internal monologue, once sharp and analytical, had softened into something almost reflective. We searched so far, she thought. We mapped stars, bent gravity, folded space. We believed intelligence guaranteed endurance. Her breathing slowed. But intelligence only teaches you how to understand the end. The implant pinged softly, a final warning. Neural activity dropping below recoverable thresholds. Automated shutdown protocols preparing to engage, not to save Herb, but to ensure her death was painless. A kindness. Programmed long ago by people who believed such an end would never truly be necessary. She let her eyes drift closed. There was no panic. No sudden burst of regret, just a quiet acceptance, heavy and absolute. The universe would continue. Stars would burn. Planets would spin, and no one would remember that her kind had ever existed. Darkness pressed in, not violently, but gently. Like a tide rising around a still body, she exhaled, and then pressure, warmth, a sensation, not have felt in over a century. Hands not the cold, jointed manipulators of her own kind, not the precise clinical grip of machines. These were uneven, calloused, alive in a way that sent shock through her nervous system even as it struggled to shut down. Her eyes snapped open. Light flooded her, vision white and blinding at first, then resolving into shapes. A helmet visor, scratched polyglass. A human face behind it, partially obscured by frost and grime. Eyes wide, focused, burning with a fierce, impossible intensity. A human holding her for a fraction of a second. Her mind rejected the image outright. Hallucination, oxygen deprivation. Neural collapse producing comforting fantasies. Drawn from memory, Humans were gone. Humans did not survive. Humans did not kneel in ash-choked storms on dead worlds, cradling the last survivor of a forgotten species like something precious. Yet the grip tightened not painfully, but deliberately, secure, real. "Hey," the human said, voice crackling through a damaged comm unit, distorted but unmistakably of, "Don't you dare go out on me now. I've got you." Her vision wavered. She tried to speak, but her throat refused to cooperate. All that escaped was a weak, broken sound. The human cursed softly, not in fear, but in urgency, and activated something on his wrist. A surge of warmth spread through her chest as emergency nanofluid flooded her system, bypassing failed organs, forcing oxygen into blood that had almost forgotten how to carry it. Pain flared, then sensation, then consciousness. She gasped. The sound tore from her like a scream, raw and desperate. Her body convulsed as systems rebooted under foreign protocols. The human held her through it all, bracing against the wind, anchoring her against the planet's relentless pull toward death. "That's it," he murmured. "Breathe. You're safe. You're not alone. Not anymore. Not alone." The words struck harder than the pain. She stared at him, eyes burning, mind scrambling to reconcile reality. His suit was old ancient by human standards. Scarred plating, jury-rigged seals, power readings flickering dangerously low. This was not a soldier from a thriving civilization. This was a survivor. He lifted her carefully, adjusting her weight as if afraid she might shatter. Around them, the storm howled, but she no longer felt its bite. The human suit projected a localized shield, barely holding, but enough. Enough as he carried her toward a distant silhouette half buried in ashes structure. Intact and humming faintly beneath layers of decay, her mind finally caught up to the impossible truth. Humans were not extinct. They were hiding. And whatever had forced them into the shadows had nearly erased the rest of the galaxy. Along with them, the interior of the structure was warm. That alone felt like a miracle. Airlocks hissed and sealed behind them, shutting out the storm with a finality that made her shudder. Lights flickered to life along curved metallic walls, illuminating dust motes that drifted like ghosts in the recycled air. The architecture was unmistakably human, modular, utilitarian, built for function over beauty. But there were signs of adaptation everywhere. Alien alloys fused into reinforcement struts, power conduits rerouted through non-standard pathways, symbols etched into panels that were not part of any human language. She recognized. The human laid her gently onto a medical platform that unfolded from the floor, its surface reshaping itself to support her anatomy. As automated systems activated, some clearly human, others something else entirely. She felt strength slowly returning to her limbs. Her vision cleared. The human removed his helmet. He was older than she expected. Lines etched his face deeply, not just from age but from strain. His hair was streaked with gray, his eyes tired but sharp. A scar ran from his temple down to his jaw, pale against weathered skin. This was not the face of someone who had lived an easy life. This was the face of endurance. "You're stable," he said, glancing at the readouts. "Barely, but stable, beats dead." She swallowed, throat still raw. "Human," she managed, voice hoarse. "How?" He gave a tired smile. Long story, silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken history. She studied the room. Personal effects were scattered across shelves, photographs, worn tools, handwritten notes pinned beside holographic displays, names she recognized, faces she had believed lost forever, humans, hundreds of them, frozen in moments of laughter, exhaustion, defiance. "You're not alone," she whispered again, more to herself than to him. "No," he said softly. "Neither are you." He pulled up a chair and sat beside her, the weight of uncounted years settling into his posture. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The station hummed quietly around them, ancient reactors maintaining a fragile equilibrium. Finally, She asked the question that had been building since the moment she opened her eyes. What happened to the galaxy? The human leaned back, eyes drifting to a display that showed the planet's surface red, broken, dying. We found something, he said. Or maybe it found us. A way to survive extinction by becoming something. Elsie met her gaze, and it demanded a price. What followed was not a single revelation, but a slow unraveling. He showed her the logs, the experiments. The decision humanity had faced when confronted with an intelligence older than stars, an entity that fed not on matter, but on complexity. Civilizations, minds, entire evolutionary histories consumed. In a race to maintain cosmic balance, humanity had refused to be consumed. Instead, they had learned to fracture themselves across time, space, and form. To abandon the loud, bright signatures that drew predators from the dark, they became whispers, shadows, observers. Rather than conquerors, most species had not been so adaptable. Her people had burned brightly too. Brightly, as the truth settled into her. Grief washed through her in waves. Not the sharp agony of fresh loss, but the deep, aching sorrow of understanding. Of seeing the universe not as a tragedy, but as a system that did not care. So you became less, she said quietly. To survive? The human shook his head. We became more careful. He stood, walking to a window that looked out into the storm beyond. We're still here, still human, still choosing. That's what matters. She considered his words for a long time. Then the choice came. The entity still watched, still fed, still balanced the universe on the edge of annihilation. Humanity had found a way to coexist, but it was fragile, required constant vigilance, sacrifice, transformation, and now she stood at the edge of that same decision. Remain as she was, one of the last of her kind. Finite and alone, or change. Adapt. Join humanity in the long, quiet fight to ensure that intelligence itself did not become a temporary phenomenon. When she agreed, the transformation was not violent, it was intimate. Nanostructures rewove her biology. Neural pathways expanded, interfacing with systems beyond flesh. She felt herself stretch, not losing who she was, but becoming capable of holding more. More memory. More perspective. More time. The pain was real. So was the awe. When it was done, she stood beside the human at the window, watching the storm with new eyes. A signal pulsed through the station. Incoming. Multiple sources. Human ships. Emerging from folded space, like ghosts returning home. The galaxy was not finished. It was only changing. She closed her eyes, not in surrender this time, but in quiet wonder. And when she opened them, she no longer saw the end. She saw the beginning of something stubborn, fragile, and undeniably human.